What's going on, everybody? My name is Alex, and that's Eileen, and you're watching It's Lights Out F1, and we are American F1 fans. And we're going to talk about the Russian Grand Prix this weekend. Honestly, to start, I usually think it's a boring kind of race. I usually don't particularly like it. But this weekend was.
It's very fitting for this season. Every time we say there's going to be a boring race, it's not boring.
No.
Well, I guess with the exception of Monaco, but yeah, we were like, oh, it's going to be a typical, it's a Mercedes track, and then qualifying threw us for a loop. And then today was very intense. I feel like I was more on the edge of my seat this race than I have been like all season.
Yeah.
I actually put my head in my sweatshirt at the end of the race. I think you were full-blown panicked, too.
I was just...
We were stressed. I'm like, I had to get up and walk around because, when you're like nervous and anxious and you're like, I can't sit still. I'm like, I don't know. I think I need to leave the room. That's how crazy it got.
Yeah. So let's just kind of get into the weekend with it. I think kind of just talking about the end of the race is not doing the whole weekend justice.
Yeah.
So normally, again, we would not really see rain here. Normally we see sun and kind of warmth. But I guess maybe the timing of the race. I don't know.
Which is weird because it's like the end of summer for us. So I'm like,
yeah, same with them. So Friday, we had the two practices, normal, traditional.
Yeah, not a lot of craziness happened.
No, but all the teams knew that the rain was definitely going to be there Saturday, without a doubt. They didn't know how much rain was coming, but they knew rain was coming. So they kind of tested and did practice a little differently. I think they did more long runs that day, and that's why kind of things were just kind of mellow. And then Saturday, free practice was canceled. I didn't get to watch the weekend very much of the practices and qualifying. I had to work, so you got to watch pretty much all the action.
Yeah. So free practice 3 got canceled, and it was like really bad rain, like spa rain. Like paper boats in the water rain. Yeah. Like it was crazy. So, they were just there, I think, kind of looking through their strategy, waiting. They actually came up with a contingency plan to do qualifying on Sunday in case they weren't actually able to do it on Saturday. So that was interesting to see. But yeah, so qualifying, everybody was on the intermediates. Obviously it had rained the entire morning. And I think it was still like kind of raining on and off in Q1. So typical, with the exception of Max didn't even do one lap because, of course, he was taking the engine penalty and the grid penalty. So he actually just went out and then came in on the pit lane. So
right. So they announced over the weekend that, Max was taking a new engine. And
which was what they had already planned. Like Christian Horner had said that they were probably going to do it at Sochi, whatever. Sure. So as expected, definitely smart. He's already, got a grid penalty, and it's typically a Mercedes track anyway. So he's always got to join. Typical Q1, I feel like the same people went out. Like there was nothing that was a surprise in Q1.
Right.
Hamilton was on top, as expected. Q2 was about the same. Hamilton was on top again. Russell almost didn't make it out of Q2, which was interesting, considering the lineup for the race today. But he almost didn't make it out. Vettel just missed it, and that was, devastating. And I think it was, other than that, it was pretty standard, for Q2. So then we get to Q3. Everybody's going out back on intermediates, but the track obviously was drying up.
It was, yeah. Rain was done.
So it was kind of like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Lewis is on provisional pole. I think there was 5 minutes left. George was out, and he's like, get the slicks ready. So he was the first one to make the call, went in, came out. The first lap wasn't the greatest, had to warm the tires up, but then everybody else was coming in, with the exception of Mercedes. They were a little late on this on this call.
Yeah, and so by the time they made the call, you're right, it was kind of late. And
they only had 2.5 minutes, and the track is a minute and a half on a fast day.
Yeah.
So they were like, they're only going to have one lap.
So then that kind of put them in a predicament. So they were stacked, and I don't know, Lewis maybe came in a little hot, wasn't really prepared for that area, and it's tight. That entrance into the pits is tight, and it's a sharp turn, pretty much 90-degree, pretty quick into it. And we noticed right away that he hit the wall.
Yeah.
The announcers saw everything and kind of hit it pretty good.
Yeah, he hit it, and he broke his front wing.
Right. So that kind of brought him into the pits, and then his Bottas was right behind him. So I don't know if you saw that he got pushed forward, and they took care of Bottas first, got his tires rotated and out so he could kind of get on the front of that, and then they pushed Lewis back, which then had even less time because that was a little bit of
by the time
process.
by the time they got out, it was too late because they did their first lap and then they barely got across in order to do one lap. But they were at a disadvantage because everybody else had an additional lap to be able to warm up their tires. So pretty much everyone was either on a flying lap or was about to start a flying lap when they came out. So Carlos was first. And he was on pole at that point, which was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Ferrari, and then Lando came through and he crushed Carlos. It was at least by half a second. So really, really strong delivery. And then that dropped Lewis down to P3. And then George Russell, Mr. Saturday.
I know. I couldn't believe it. It was... I think it was timing for him, the fact that a lot of other guys couldn't get...
Well, he was the first. He had the most laps.
He had his tires the most warmed up. I think he was just the most prepared for that conditions at that time.
Yeah.
And it was well-deserved. He deserved it. And honestly, in my opinion, P3 is the best spot to be on this course, on this track. So I know, race Drive to Survive, Bottas has talked about it on his episode that he was on. But it is true. If you watch previous seasons before that too, it's the pole setter traditionally does not win this race, and
they've never won.
Yeah, and still never won.
Still never won. So, but so that was it was a crazy end to Q3. Not just the top three, but Lewis was on his only lap, and the announcers they weren't even covering it because I think they were also hyped up about Lando being on provisional pole and Russell was P3 and. The last turn, Lewis ended up, I think, oversteering or understeering or something and ended up spinning out and put his back end into the wall. So, which is very unusual to see that. That never happens. But I think he was just pressed for time, just given the circumstances of, the pit lane issue. And so that probably, he had a little bit of pressure. So, ultimately, he qualified with his intermediate lap, and he was, starting P4. Ricciardo was P5, and then Valtteri was P6 until this morning.
Yeah.
So qualifying was interesting, but we were so excited to see Lando on pole. So it was his first pole position. So
I mean, it's pretty sweet to have 2 weeks ago, the last race, McLaren go 1 and 2. And then just to start this weekend, just before the race would even start, we have, McLaren number 1 again. And then
it's been a long time coming.
Ricciardo finishing going 5th, which is not bad either, know. So they were sitting really, really well. And, so going to this morning, there was a little bit of talk of possible rain near the end of the race. They weren't sure exactly when.
At first, they were talking about there was going to be rain 5 minutes into the race, and then the wind must have shifted it or something. But so we had four cars start from the back with engine penalties. So Max was in last, Leclerc was in 19th, Latifi was in 18th, and then Bottas took his back-to-back engine penalties. He got another new engine this week, so. We were a little bit confused by that this morning, but I guess it's just their strategy to make sure that they have another strong engine in the rotation, so they don't have to do it again.
That's exactly right. So they just wanted to make sure that Bottas had, the proper amount of insurance. Because I remember when he hit, or when Russell hit Bottas at that race,
Imola,
a while ago in the beginning of the season or closer to the beginning of the season. I think they lost that whole entire engine on that one. So he was kind of shorthanded already going into that. And so maybe it was a good move. And, where he finished, where Bottas finished today was fifth
Yeah.
from the back.
Uh-huh.
That's not bad.
Well, last week, I think they did it, and last week they were banking on him doing the same thing, going from P19, whatever he was, to P3. So that was the expectation, but whatever. So that was interesting. Yeah. So we start the race. And
yeah, so at the beginning of the race, looks like everyone, the top 4, top 5, I mean, I guess top 10.
It was like their top. It was like their top 7,
They all
8.
got off to a really good start, and there was for sure was a tow, and there was a slipstream that some of the people were getting. But I noticed that at first Russell was using the slipstream, but then he tried to get out to the long side, and by the time he got alongside, he definitely was not fast enough. You okay? Do you need to answer that?
Yeah, no, I'm fine.
Okay. So, yeah, he just wasn't fast enough. And the other guys were kind of jumping up and around too, and
yeah, Ricardo had a great start.
yeah.
Lance Stroll had a great start.
Lewis was pretty much up there as well.
Lewis had an okay start for him, but then, he came to basically to the right side of Carlos.
Well,
and then
you're right.
Backed
So
off.
I think because he was starting on that side of the grid already, and then he kind of stayed on the inside for turn 2, which is the first braking zone that they have for that straightaway. Mm-hmm. And he kind of got sandwiched. You're right. He kind of got squished a little bit, so he kind of got on the brakes and kind of backed off. He saved himself. He knew to fight later, It's like you said, the Formula One team or trio has been bringing the 100th ceremonial stuff
I have been
to a lot of races.
How many times have I been saying, when are we getting Lewis's 100th race? So he even said I didn't know when it was going to come. So
and who knows?
They've had the bottle of champagne with 100 wins on it. They've had the ground thing that they put where they put the car. They've had all this stuff in preparation for it. So smart move, just considering he's been through some tough accidents this year. So
yeah. So coming out of turn 2, the first braking zone, Carlos had the lead actually, and he locked up, but was able to maintain the lead. And Norris was in second by then, but we saw a lot of people kind of stay on track, kind of make some moves, but then Alonso was in his own world.
Alonso decided he was going to he decided before the race, I think, that he was going to take the long way, the runoff lane, basically, and in turn 2, because I swear to God, he practiced it on the formation lap, okay? But I swear, but whatever. He just took it, didn't even try to brake and just was off the track, came around and was able to pass everybody.
Yeah, so we
were like, what's going on with Alonso? What?
So for some reason, the FIA and all the commissioners and the judges, they wanted everybody to go through that styrofoam chicane.
But he just was able to go straight.
But he went through it, but the way he angled himself going through it, it was almost like a straight shot. And honestly, it looked like he was able to accelerate faster and get ahead a few spaces.
He definitely was.
And then,
it was strange. Whatever. He was in his own world. But needless to say, he was at that point in P6. He was in front of Lewis, and so it was one lap, and Lewis overtook him. But it was an interesting first corner. We were like, what just happened?
So for the first few laps, Carlos was in the lead, had a pretty decent lead. Norris was kind of just following around, just kind of keeping his pace really well. Just they were just biding their time, I think. Mm-hmm. A lot of DRS. Thank you. I don't know why I always stumble on that. DRS trains were kind of popping up.
Well, there was 2 major ones. Yeah. So the first one was Russell, and he had, about a 7 to 8 second gap. It was varying from Norris, so they were falling off pretty significantly. So it was Norris, then Russell, and it was like Russell, Stroll, Ricardo, Lewis, Perez, and then there was a little bit of whatever, and then I think it was Alonso, Vettel, and then everybody else, and Max and Bottas were kind of making their way back up, on the charge. So That went on for some time, and it felt like that was the boring part of the race where not a whole lot of activity was happening.
Right.
Then people started to, make some pit stops, and was it the right call to go early? Was it the wrong call? And, so we got to, I guess, the mid-cycle part when...
So I think a few teams either A, saw some rain coming ahead. They maybe thought it was going to come a little earlier, but a few teams pulled the trigger early on doing the pit stops, and they came in like you keep saying like lap 10, like lap 10.
I swear to God, Stroll came in on a lap 10 or 11.
I feel like it was 11, 12, but yeah, there. It was totally right there.
It was super early.
And there was a lot of teams, and I think there was a little bit of strategically things at play there.
Yeah, it was a lot of the teams that weren't really contenders for the top, though. So it was like Aston Martin, I think like Alfa Romeo, I don't know, like Williams. I feel like Russell pitted pretty early, which opened up like for that train of people to actually be able to start to make activity. And then Lewis was like, "Oh, we're gonna do the undercut," like on his radio, he was trying to pull a fast one. So
the team came out and kind of waited.
And then they ended up, neither team came in, but I think it was the following lap, Ricciardo came in with a really bad stop, so that he ended up back out, and Hamilton on that next lap did pit, but he like flat spotted. And then basically had to come in. So he got new tires. And the interesting thing is when he came into the pits, guess who came in after him? Max Verstappen. Yeah. So it's just funny. But and as he was pulling out, Max was like basically pulling in right after. And I'm like, honestly, if he would have been 1 second closer, that could have affected Hamilton's pit stop, which would have affected the race as well. So it's just crazy how their worlds keep colliding so much.
Champion contenders.
Yeah, but Lewis had a good pit stop, was able to get out in front of Ricciardo, and then Max ended up out behind Ricciardo, and that's where he was kind of stuck for a little while during that period where he wasn't able to continue his charge, but Hamilton was able to continue to make his way back up. And the biggest piece that happened, I guess, during that period was Lewis made his way into P2.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot else happened other than like Bottas pitted and then was kind of like stuck.
Yeah.
He was like stuck in P14 for a while, and I'm like, what's going on with him? Like, why can't he overtake Vettel?
Yeah, you were kind of like, this is kind of boring. I'm pretty sure I heard you say that for a moment.
I did say I was bored. I was like, oh God, I'm bored.
It was kind of being a normal Russian Grand Prix, and I kept saying, I'm like, I don't know if I said it before the race or in the beginning of the race. I'm like, man, if it rains and it rains at the end, it's going to be wild. And if it rains even closer to the end, it's going to even be trickier because a lot of the guys that are drivers, they make rash decisions when they're just sitting behind there when they think, I honestly, I'm like, oh, I can outpace the rain. I can outbeat the rain. I can just finish it like 1 lap left, 2 laps left, 4 laps left, right?
Yeah.
I'll beat the rain.
Well, it was, I want to say the limbo piece was like Max was really pushing and like making progress, but then was kind of stuck. And he was complaining about his tires.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, is he going to go for a 2-stop strategy or like what's going to happen? And then we started to get too close to that period. But at the time, Hamilton had really good pace and was like, basically, I think 12 and a half seconds was in between him and Norris at one point.
Yeah, you're pretty close to
He
that,
got it down to like 2 seconds, and then it was like under 2 seconds. And, and he even came on the radio and was like, good pace, huh? Like, pat himself on the back like, I'm doing good.
Yep.
So he was feeling really confident in control. So I'm like, okay, like it's going to get interesting here. And then I want to say Bono came on the radio, or somebody else's engineer was like, okay, we've got some rain coming. And so it was like, what's going to happen? So the suspense started to build because it, like, I would say started maybe sprinkling, and then they panned to the fans all pulling their umbrellas out, and they're like, okay, it's starting to rain. So then, everyone, it's you either make one decision or the other decision. You've got 2 choices to go in and change intermediates, and who's going to do it first.
Yeah, and always the person behind will always have a slightly better odds on making that decision because you get
to gauge the person in front of you.
Yeah, right. So you get to play off their move. it always kind of gives you the upper hand slightly.
Yeah, so everyone kind of started to slow down. It was raining like heavier in certain areas, like the back half of the course. Some parts were still dry, so it was like really kind of a mixed bag. Of course, we were paying attention to the front at that point, but I think Vettel pitted, Bottas pitted. Like there was
Max
a few.
pitted.
Oh no, Max didn't pit just yet. He was like in the middle of the group, but there were some people that went to intermediates. And Lewis and Hamilton were kind of starting.
But don't forget Yuki. I'm pretty sure right around there he went to softs. But
Yuki did go to softs.
he did. But if you heard the radio too, Carlos was calling for the intermediates and a set of hot softs too. Because honestly, if you put a set of hot softs, real sticky tire on there, that kind of helps too. If it wasn't so.
Well, I think the thing with Carlos and Lando with this, like with the decisions that they made, like, and obviously Carlos went to intermediates, given the circumstances,
Sure.
but thinking that was just based off of qualifying the day before. Like they had great laps and it was wet and they had softs on. So, maybe that's why they made that decision. But ultimately it started to get really tricky out there. Both McLaren and Mercedes were calling for them, like, do you want to come in, like whatever. And Bono actually told Lewis to pit. He's like, box, and he just stayed out against the team's wishes. So at that point, I think that's when we were like, oh my God, like just
we were stressing. It was wild. It was a nail biter. And
Lando went off the track. Lewis went off the track. It was like everybody was going off the track. There was yellow flags, there's all sorts of stuff. So I think it was the next lap after they called for Lewis to come in, Verstappen pitted. And so when we watched the onboards for Lewis, we heard the whole conversation, and he was like, okay, Verstappen pitted, and the rain's going to get worse before it gets better. So
and there's a nice gap of free air.
Yeah, there was 38 seconds. So so Lewis went in, Lando stayed out, and his engineer, Lando's engineer, got on and was like, okay, Lewis pitted. And he's like, I see that. And that's when he was starting to get, I'm sure, stressed. The pressure of driving in the rain and feeling like you're, not in control of your car. And then wanting to win your first race.
Yeah.
So he stayed out, and I think he made it one lap. Lewis, of course, came out and was immediately, like, on the charge. It was like...
So when he came out, he was 19 seconds behind.
26 seconds
26 seconds behind. And
in one lap, of course, because Lando was taking it easy, kind of going out, whatever, I want to say got it down to 12 seconds. It was a pretty significant change in that one lap. It was from lap 50 to 51. Lando still didn't go in, stayed out for that next lap, and then ultimately on, I think it was turn 2, went out and lost control. Didn't put it into the wall, but Lewis was able to overtake him.
Yeah.
So
I did something that I don't normally do with Eileen, and I made her watch some onboards. And I watched, we watched Hamilton's, and then we watched Norris's, and we watched them pretty much from both the same point. It was like lap 6 or lap 7, with lap 6 or 7 laps left. And just the onboard communication between the drivers and their pit crew and their pit wall, completely different. Mm-hmm. And I don't know.
Well, I mean, Lando even said after that nobody told him that the rain was going to get worse than what it was.
Yeah. And I just think, I think there's a lot more people making a lot more moves in Mercedes to help make that call, because I kept telling you there was a couple critical words that were being said by those teams to the driver that was like, oh, that's a telltale sign. Like that might have been one. And then, and definitely.
Yeah, this is the crossover time. That's what was said to
big.
Lewis.
Yeah, and that was big. And honestly, you can tell the difference between the information that Lewis was getting it, the way he was receiving it, and the way that Norris was receiving it. And Norris was being pursued. He was being pressured. He was trying to go first win. And, he was being a little bit agitated at his team.
Yeah, he told his engineer to shut up.
Yeah, and I know he's young, and you kind of see some of these young guys saying that, and I don't know, that I think at this point he should have just let his guys tell him, all the information that he needed to hear. And
I just think, I mean, after Lewis pitted, it was like, okay, we're just going to stick to the strategy and stay out with 3 laps left.
yeah,
When he could have pitted and still got P2 and been
Could've.
in a much safer situation.
yeah, and his team made the bad call there. They told him.
They had to stay out. Like, we're staying on these tires to the end. And so, and then ultimately he ended up having to pit because he's like, I can't do this. I'm going to crash after the big runoff in turn 2, which even later in the lap trying to get back to the pit lane, he had another spin off the track. Then he didn't actually make the pit lane. So, I mean, it was really tough circumstances, and it did start raining pretty heavily. So it was devastating to see because, we were really kind of rooting for him to get his first win. And it's like so exciting that Lewis got his 100th win. We've been waiting. It's like the culmination. We've been waiting for him to get it. But then it's like, what was the cost for Lando to get his first win? It was kind of it was a tough, like,
it was bittersweet.
Oh, it was hard. So.
Yeah, so, it was a traditionally, normally boring race.
But it's 2020. It's the 2021 season, so nothing is boring.
Yeah, and so the last 6 laps were crazy.
Yeah, it was like half of the teams were like, we're staying out. Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, obviously, I'm like Lando Norris. I feel like there were some more people, probably Gasly, Stroll, and then everybody else was like, okay, we're going to the intermediates. So it's either like you're rolling the dice. Do you stay out and the rain stops and you win, or do you go in, the rain stays persistent, and then you win? So it was 50-50 for everybody.
Yeah,
but it did get crazy. Charles went off the track, fell out of points.
Yep.
Stroll and Vettel hit each other. Then Stroll right after hit Gasly, which ruined Gasly's race. So there was a lot of craziness that happened right there at the end. When Lando came back out, he was able to overtake Kimi to get, more points, which was good too. He didn't give up. So kudos to him for that. But let's talk about Max Verstappen, P20 to P2. I'm like, we just can't get Hamilton and Max away from each other.
We can't.
But what a drive for him. And he really looked out from the rain because he went in at the right time, came out when teams were basically still in that deciding phase, and he was able to charge up because everybody was just slipping and sliding and lost a lot of time. So really impressive.
Yeah, so he was voted driver of the day by F1, and
No, he wasn't.
oh no, he wasn't. It was Lando.
It was Lando.
Yeah,
he was voted driver of the day by me.
You're right. You're right. My bad. Lando was. Yeah, he did good. He drove really well. He made the right call, getting on his inters at the right time, and our camera lost the light. Fuck.
It's okay.
Yeah. It's okay.
Are you gonna fix this or edit it or? Oh my God.
Sorry. Okay. And we are back. Sorry about that. I had a technical issue. So, so Max, we were talking about Max, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he had a really good come up, and I guess, yes, I would agree. Yes, he was driver of the day. I think he did really, really well. I think Lewis was driver of the day, too.
Yeah.
Got his 100th win, which nobody has ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And
so he broke that record. And then he also, they didn't say this, but I knew it going into this race that he had the chance to be the first racer to score over 4,000 points. He was at like 3,999.5. And so obviously he beat that record as well. So, some really big things. It was good to see. He was like, I didn't feel like we were ever going to get here, it felt like. And even for me as a fan, I was like, oh my God,
I know,
we're never going to get to 100. So, but Max, it was super impressive to see. Obviously, nobody thought that starting last, he was going to end up in P2. So really, really cool.
You're right. So I don't know if I asked you on this yet, but I know we talked earlier about it. Do you think Lewis would have beat Lando if it stayed dry.
I mean, I felt pretty confident that he was going to, just based on his own pace. So, I mean, he did hunt him down, like from double-digit gap to 2 seconds, under 2 seconds. So, and he's just experienced. So for me, we saw it in Imola. That's what we kept kind of referencing back to, was Lewis charging back after his little, runoff and ending up passing Lando to get P2 in Imola. So I think he would have, given the track circumstances. There's still a lot of time left. So
yeah, I personally don't think he would have. I think there would have been really, really close. I think it would have been the last lap if it would have even happened, but I don't think it would have. I think Lando would have had it in the bag if it would have stayed dry. What else do I had a couple other questions. I'm trying to remember. So really, Lando kind of lost it for himself. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's a bad decision. I also think the team should have just made the decision, but experience played the factor today. Lewis.
Yeah, thank you.
Lewis did go. He went against team orders and stayed out too. And I was telling you, I'm like, I feel like Lewis has PTSD from pit lanes, from like losing races in the pit lane
or hitting pit lane
to hitting the wall yesterday. So, I think that's why he was also like, let's just see. And he did say on the radio, it's not really raining hard, but it's slippery. So it was, tough to really kind of figure out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I definitely agree. I think the team decision to not like force him to come in really hurt Lando, and it killed the race. But a huge lesson learned. He's young.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a rookie, but he's definitely young, and I think that's really ultimately what lost it for him, the lack of the team giving him the proper information over the radio.
Yeah, about the weather. Because they were saying, hey, do you want... What do you think? What do you think about inners?
What do you think about inners? Well, when you're got 3 laps left, I don't want anything to do with that. Mm-hmm. I want to finish this.
Yeah.
I'm
winning the race.
they didn't give him the proper words. They didn't give him the proper sayings, or didn't say anything properly to him. Mm-hmm. Where again, I'll reference to what they said to Lewis. How they said the crossover times. Okay. The crossover times on intermediates are actually now faster. That's a key indication. The fact that he said it's going to get worse before it gets better, and then then he also got a gap timing on how much air gap he'll have when he comes out.
If he's unsafe, if he's safe. There's a lot of communication. So.
Yeah, it was really, really a lot of difference between the communication. I recommend you guys go out there and listen to some of the onboards. But, I'm a crazy fan, and I like to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, you can find them on YouTube. People put them up,
they do.
like, after everything. So,
yeah.
But no, that definitely was what lost the race today, which, is it's really tough. And for me, it was even tougher because I'm like, now he's not even on the podium.
Yeah.
Because they just stuck to that decision that they had to stay out on those tires, when I feel like he could have still finished P2 and just, like, made the decision like, man, we didn't pull it. We didn't go at the same time as Lewis. We're going next lap. And he would have, I mean, there was a 40-second gap.
Yeah, even when Lewis pitted and Norris went around for the next lap, if he would have went in that next time around, he would have came in second place.
Yep.
And
well, I mean, think about it, because
there's nothing wrong with that, but
it would have only been 25 seconds difference.
But the team told him to stay out right at the entry, and
they were still going for the win. They were still very ambitious. Like, can we hold it out? There's a 26-second gap, but I mean, it just, because the conditions were so bad, Lewis was able to catch him like within a lap and not even a half. So that was crazy, but yeah. Definitely a bummer.
Yeah, sad. I'm a huge McLaren fan, and that hurt. That bummed. I was bummed because having 2 race weekends back to back with the promise of some McLaren victory after the last race, it's pretty sweet to see.
They are looking good, so
yeah. So that kind of sums up the race. We had a Lewis Hamilton take first, and then the normal podium, Max Verstappen, but he came from 20th to P2, and the announcers were saying that he's never done that. This is the first time he's done that, and that's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
it's not as good as what Perez did last year with the P20 to P1. But there was a lot of
Yeah,
really
but
good
we also- yeah,
circumstances. There was a lot of
there
things
was
that happened that made that,
DNFs,
that worked in his favor for that.
Punctures.
And there was a lot of things that happened here today too with the last few laps. It was a lot of perfect timing that it shows top teams. If we go play the onboard of Max, I'm sure that he was getting really good information about weather, tires, gaps, and what other people are doing. And yeah, you're right. He wasn't the first one to get on the inters, but he got on there right at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did.
And sometimes it is, I hear a lot of other people say it's like where you're at on the track at the time of the rain coming in and hitting the track, because you could be just passing the pit lane and all of a sudden now
it starts pouring.
It's fully pouring, but the guys that were behind you are still haven't passed the start stop line, and they can enter the pit lane, and now all of a sudden they got the advantage, and that's kind of how it turned out today, and it was pretty impressive. It was the best Russian Sochi GP race I've ever seen, and I believe I've seen all the ones from going back from to today all the way back to 2016, and there was, I think, maybe 2001 before that, or maybe
They said like the 1900s.
Well, no, because it was only been going there, I think, since 2015, and then before that was 53 and 52, and that was in a totally different area. It wasn't in Sochi; it was somewhere else.
Yeah, next year is the last year for Sochi. They're going to St. Petersburg or whatever,
which is good because it's a better location for the European area because it's more north, so they're going to get a lot more weather, climate. And it should be a different type of race, and I think that's kind of why they were leaving too. Is they were kind of tight. But if it kind of rains like this,
anything can happen.
The conspiracy theorist in me, I'm just joking, but it could be real too.
God.
Is I think government controlling the clouds, and I think the Russian government was able to get the planes up there to get the clouds going right to suck up the water from the ocean to give us a little rain weekend because. We know Putin does like Formula One. He has been to Formula One races. He has handed trophies to the winners of previous seasons and previous years. So you never know. That's just, crazy talk from me. That kind of sums up the race. Lewis got his 100th, which was great.
Congrats to Lewis.
Yeah, you're happy about that.
Yes. So we'll see. I mean, now so Lewis is leading the championship again. So it's like, I swear, it's changed. Like, who's the leader 5 times this season? Like, wow, this is pretty crazy.
It went from Max having a 5-point lead
this past,
to now Lewis having a 2-point lead. And that's just incredible. I know you saw a stat earlier saying there hasn't been a championship battle this tight since
after 15 rounds.
After 15 rounds, ever. And I would agree. I've been, like I said, I've been a fan for a little while, a few years, and I haven't seen in my lifetime of being a fan anything like this. I would say maybe back when Cena and Schumacher and Becky, even back before that, and Hunt and Lauda before our generation, maybe.
What about 2006 when Lewis Hamilton beat out Felipe Massa for 1 point?
2007?
Was it 2007?
When he won it. Oh, no, it was 2008 when he won the championship by 1 point.
Yeah, when he asked him post-race interview.
But you're right. That was down to the wire, and I guess that was a good season too.
Yeah, pretty crazy though. No, it's been quite entertaining. I think it's really like rallied the fans in a positive and also a negative way. Like people are very like one-sided or like not just valuing both drivers. Yeah. Commitment and what they do, but yeah, it's been very exciting.
Yeah, so we're kind of getting close to the end here. We got 6 races left.
7, but one of them's not confirmed, so I'm like, we're not too sure yet.
Yeah, so next week we got Turkey.
Yeah, and then I think it's America.
It is, yeah. It's Turkey in 2 weeks, October 8th. That's the start of the race weekend, and then 2 weeks after that would be the United States Grand Prix.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, if anything was like Turkey like last year, it's going to be crazy and fun and good.
Well, it rained last year.
It did.
Stroll was on pole. Remember, Stroll on pole.
Yeah. So, I'm bummed that Lando didn't get his first win.
Yeah, but it's gonna come. It's
But,
bound to come. He's been performing so well. So we're just,
Yeah.
it would have been great to see. But
Yeah, and I'm happy that Lewis finally got his 100th. So it's bittersweet, and congratulations to him for that. I mean, incredible.
yeah,
Once in a generation type of racer. The fact that it happened so fast after Schumacher. And speaking of him, if you haven't seen the Netflix show, I recommend it. I've watched it twice. I know she's watched. I made her watch it with me. It's really good, even if you're not really an F1 fan. If you're only watching this because you're friends of us in real life, start watching F1. Honestly, I find it to be really, entertaining, even though it's just cars going around. I don't know.
It's not just cars going around.
It's not.
You have to get invested into the drama.
It is,
because
and
I feel like there's a lot of drama in F1. And I stay a little bit closer to it than you do, but every news article and the low blows and the comments, and so it just, and everyone, of course, all the racers, they do their talking on the track, but they really do their talking off the track too. So it's interesting, but it's definitely fun to follow along with. We know they all get along, they're all friends, but it is interesting. Even the team principals, there's
Yeah, and so. I mean they kind of maybe play into it to help with the drama. But if you look at previous generations and previous eras of Formula One, there was a lot of heat and fighting and cheating going on between teams, and things were happening, and nowadays, yeah, you're right. Most of these guys look like really, really good friends, and some of them been racing together since they were probably 7. So yeah, they're friends, and these kids, they're not even, these men and these racers, these drivers, they're a lot more respectful, and I think that's what I like about, this racing compared to American racing. Your traditional NASCAR or IndyCar. Now, IndyCar is pretty good, but it's not the same. It doesn't have the same drama. It doesn't have the same type of driver swag. Like, if you ask anyone that's in IndyCar, they all want to go to Formula One, or they're Formula One drivers that are, no longer can be on a 20-man grid. Car in that formula, so they're back there in IndyCar. So there is something about IndyCar being top notch, and I'm excited for the last 7 races. Turkey in America are in the next few weeks. And
he meant to say F1.
What did I say? IndyCar.
Yeah. You're shunned.
F1. Yeah. So yeah.
We're going down to Abu Dhabi but Mercedes is running away with the constructor right now. I think it's 32 points.
33, somewhere in there.
A lot can happen with that, but we've seen it before. But definitely the drivers' championship. It's 2 points, literally 2 points.
Yeah, so
that's crazy.
I guess leave it with there. If you got anything else.
No, that's it.
All right.
We'll see you guys after Turkey.
Yeah, we will. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Alex. That's Eileen, and you've been watching It's Lights Out F1, and you can like and subscribe. Please ask any questions too if you like. So we'll leave you there. Thanks. Bye.
I forgot to say, I wanted to say something about the bath towel girls.